Namaste. Psychoanalysis and philosophy, closure of modernity. Each historical era leaves its contributions and traces in human civilization. Modernity is one such era. We will discuss the closure of this modernity with psychoanalysis consultant Mr. Himanshu Vaidya. Namaste, Mr. Vaidya.
Namaste.
Mr. Vaidya, can we start with what is modern era or modernity as we call it?
The historical era from 1700 onwards till 20th century, end of it, is usually termed as the modern era. Some people believe modern era ended with the Second World War. Some believe in 1950. Some believe after the fall of Soviet Union. Most people put the modern era to be between 1700 and 2000. In my opinion, uh, the era is still not has still not ended, and it is still going on in its last phase of closure. So my opinion is that the modern era has not ended in the year 2000, but it is still continuing, and the closure is already on, and we should see the closure complete by around 2035. So this is a era which is one of the most dynamic era in human history. I don't think in the history of human civilization we find any other era where per year change, if we look at it, is so high. So we have changed more in the last 300 years than in the past 3000 years. And we can see the change growing even more accelerated and rapid in the years after 1975, where there has been virtually an explosion of innovations, and even more after 1990. So we are looking at a very unique era in the history of humanity, where technology has done what it could not do before, and we find ourselves in a completely different situation than what our ancestors found them in. So in that sense, the modern era is very important. And the modern era has two aspects to it. The constructive aspect of science, technology, human progress, increase in food grain production, lowering of hunger, making medicines available to a large population, and so on. However, we also see the two world wars and many conflicts and imperialism also of that era. So this era is a very complicated era in terms of its costs and benefits, and we are evaluating the era as the era comes to an end. About the era, when we look back and we look at the present and we look at the future, there are two kinds of worldviews that come out. The generation which is post 1990, which has seen only the closure of modernity but not the pre-period of it. The pre-period of the closure, meaning the main period of modernity. That's a very different generation with a very different worldview. And for them, this change is normal. And for them, entering into a postmodern world after 2035 will not be any difficult thing to do. But for people who have seen the time before 1990 as adults, for them, the closure of modernity also calls for a revisit, a catharsis, and a mourning of the end of the modern era and the end of modernity, and to learn from them and create a synthesis for the times to come.
Why or how do we call this a closure period or closure of modernity?
Closure of an era comes because of certain developments. One such development is related to the paradigmatic shift in science and philosophy. Second development, which is very important for any era to come to an end, is the innovation and creation of a very different kind of a world on an everyday basis. And third development, which is very important for any era to come to a close, is people finding out limitations of what is central to that era and a desire in the hearts of people to move on, try something new, and overcome the limitations of that era. When we look at the modern era and modernity, the spirit of that era, the spirit of that age, so to say, we see all the three in motion. In science, a paradigmatic shift is happening from materialism to a non-materialistic or a semi-materialistic kind of a worldview, where parapsychology, holistic healing, energy healing, they are all coming to the center stage. And not only coming to the center stage, much of that is getting empirically validated. So there is a paradigmatic shift in science. Corresponding to this, there is a paradigmatic shift in philosophy, where more and more people are ready and open to accept an idealistic point of view, a spiritual point of view, much in contrast to what was the mainstream in the modern period from the not the modern period, the central part of the modern period from 1700 to 1975. That was a very different kind of a period where what we think to be the future, the acceptable, um, the worth investigating, the worth meaning providing to us was just laughed at as superstition, orthodoxy, and quackery. So there is a shift in the first sign of closure is there is a complete shift in the paradigm of science and philosophy. The second important element is uh, the shift in the way people live every day. More and more people are finding it too much to just go into this race of getting up early every morning, traveling 2 hours, working for 14 hours, again traveling 2 hours and going to sleep while the TV is on. This is something that people are tired of and they are reassessing and they are trying to find a golden mean between nothing to do and having no time to spare. And this is creating alternative lifestyles where the everyday is going more back to nature, more becoming holistic, more bringing in and synthesizing the ancient ways of living, spirituality coming more into the center and everyday of everyone, arts and culture getting more and more attention, and therefore while the everyday in terms of gadgets is uh, contemporary, people are moving back in time with respect to how to live and spend their time and prioritize their timings. So the everyday is undergoing a change. The third element is people have seen the limitations of modernity, and the limitations of modernity is seen in all the fronts: social, cultural, scientific, and political, and economic. So there is no part of life where limitations of what was the outcome of modernity is clearly seen. And once the limitations of modernity are clearly seen, people are trying to better it and move away from it, not necessarily completely. It is not a either or situation. It is a situation of continual evolution and synthesis, but people are moving away from being fanatically hardcore, saturated and soaked in modernity when it comes to assessing the results of modernity. People are more open today to be more objective, critical, and vocal about the limitations of modernity, about the failure of modernity, and ready to resynthesize the pre-modern, ancient, spiritual, and holistic worldview into their everyday life. So, on all the 3 points, we see there is a clear sign of closure of modernity, this era where people are reassessing, moving away from the central tenets, accepting new worldviews, new ways of living, and trying to somehow make out sense of how to design the future. We don't have answers yet, but we definitely know what does not work. We don't know what will work,
Right.
but we know what does not work. And many things of modernity fall into that basket of what does not work or works only partially. And therefore, uh, we know that modernity has its own limitations and failings. And we know that is what modernity can give us is not enough for us, and we need to find something more. And naturally, as a part of it, people will move on to the next era in historical sense. And therefore, uh, to me, it seems the closure of modernity is a fact and really on. And by 2035, we should see the era coming to an end.
So we are pretty close to 2035. So in that sense, we are almost at the edge of it. So how do you look back to this era or into this era?
Um, every era has its own positive and not positive aspects to it. When we look at the modern era, modernity also has its own positive and not positive aspects. When we look at the positive aspects of what this era has given us, it has given us freedom from the kings and dictators for most of the world, if not the whole world. It has given us democracy, individualism, science, rationalism on one side. It has put an end to superstition and sort of salvaged knowledge from quackery, mythology, and superstition and brought empirical validation to the center stage. It has freed the individual from all that was entangling the individual, be it family, society, or the state. So, those are the good parts. The difficult parts and not good parts of modernity are first, it is based upon self centeredness. Two, it is based upon hedonism. Three, it is based upon Abrahamical thinking of the special place of the human race and the world made for us to use as we please. Fourth, it is based upon singularity, which is an outcome of which is an outcome of Abrahamical thinking uh, in opposition to pluralism. It is based upon economics at the center of society, which never was the case before this era. There were societies where religion was at the center. There were societies when spirituality was at the center. There were societies where philosophy and arts was at the center. There were societies when bravery was at the center. But this is an era where economics was at the center. Uh, and this created a democracy which was a sham democracy because of economics being in the center. And Nietzsche used to say about it this mania of counting noses, the rule of shopkeepers. It also brought in this whole idea of reckless hedonism and a contractual society where every relation essentially is a contract of cost and benefit. And in that context, when you try to minimize cost and maximize benefit, in the ultimate analysis, we come to a very alienated and a lonely individual because too much of calculation results in a loss. It is that kind of a situation. Ironic but true. And this has brought us to a point where we are living in the middle of grand technological ruins where in a material sense we have grand achievements, grand creations, but in the inward psychological sense, in the spiritual sense, we are living in what T.S. Eliot would call a wasteland. And therefore, these are like, in a psychological sense, we are living in ruins, while in the physical sense, we are living in the middle of grand and technologically sophisticated creations. So, when we look at this kind of a inner poverty, and we also look at the outer poverty, which is out of injustice of distribution, and then we look at industrial scale destruction which we unleash upon each other, and all of that is found in this particular era. We look at the cost benefit analysis and we appreciate what it has given us, but what it has taken away from us and what it has given us in a negative sense, that is too much for us to justify the cost of it. And that's one of the reasons why we wish to move away. And this is still not something which is very popular and known to everyone. There is a group of people who is acutely and deeply feeling this, while the majority of the society still is largely in the grip of the the strange hold of the not very good things of modernity. So, in a sense, we are seeing the beginnings of a change of an era.
What do you think will be the implication of this closure?
Implications will be deep, profound, and pervasive. Um, Implications on science and philosophy will be a movement away from singularism to pluralism, a movement from materialism to idealism, or at least uh, non-rigid and soft and flexible materialism, if nothing else. Movement in the area of health from allopathy to holistic healing. Movement in the area of everyday living to from a mechanistic robotic living at present to a more balanced and more enriched living in terms of arts, culture, and spirituality. However, uh, the new era, if we see, will come in a very different flavor. But before that, before I go there, uh, one of the implications and very deep and serious implications is in the area of politics, because the closure of modernity also, not only closure, the closure of modernity and the failure of modernity in the area that it fails. I'm not saying there's nothing good about it, but the closure of modernity in that sense has given rise to very fanatical pre-modern ideas resurging up. This resurgence of pre-modern fanatic idea, this almost return to crusades, that kind of a movement is also partly responsible, partly has come up because of the failure of modernity. There are many reasons for it, but this is also one of the reasons that modernity, the way it was, fueled further this fanaticism that we see. And that has very deep implications for world peace, for world order, and also for uh, a kind of a worldwide struggle which is very violent in its flavor to start and to go on. And it doesn't seem as though we have any solution for it in the near future. And we will be seeing this violent resurgence of pre-modern ideas taking hold of minds of people as the closure of modernity goes on, and the new era has not yet captured the minds of people.
Can you say that under this struggle or this movement towards more fanaticism, there is a deeper desire of you go back to the roots, which has taken away from modernity? Modernity has taken humanity away from the roots.
Yes, there is one force of the type that you are referring to. There is definitely uh, a search to go back to the roots and feel anchored in social relationships, in the community, and in the archetypal psychological world, and anchored in nature. So
Right.
there is definitely a search for the anchor in an inward sense of the term. There's definitely an inward search for an anchor, no doubt about it. Uh, what has happened is that this inward search for an anchor in more Abrahamically driven religions has taken people not towards an inward journey which would be peaceful and enriching and more exploratory and revealing. Rather, it has taken them to the Middle Ages, the fanaticism of the Middle Age. And the fanaticism of the Middle Age is the false anchor to which they have anchored themselves. So the search for an anchor has been hijacked by middle era fanaticism, and they are now anchored at a very different station from where they were uh, trying to get to. So they are on a completely different station, and the way the strange hold on the mind is, it seems very unlikely that anyone will be able to set them free from there and put them on the path of the real inward search for an inner anchor which is peaceful and enriching. So it's a tragedy, but I don't think many people really have a solution to it. It seems any solution that we think of will involve the use of force and violence, and there seems to be no way out but through a tragedy of violence. So this is the paradox of the historical era that we live in, that we know closure of modernity is on, but we really don't have a vision for the next era. And we don't know how to prevent the tragedy of this era as this draws to a close.
Is art anyway connected to this closure?
Yes, it is. And it is connected in two ways. One is the um, art has to celebrate every era, the best of every era. Art has to reflect from a distance at every era as it draws to a close. And towards the closure, and especially after closure, art has to enter into a nostalgic engagement and mourning of the era that is gone. Unfortunately, art has failed to do this. It has not done it for the era that was before modernity, and it is not doing it right now for modernity as it draws to a close. And this is very, very necessary for a healthy overcoming of the era in our minds and preparing ourselves for the next era, fully living the liveliness, the goodness, and the not goodness of this era, and mourning and nostalgically looking at the era, feeling the era, and mourning its passing away. Because one of the things that modernity did was almost an assassination of the mythological world in our minds, almost an assassination of being in touch with nature, almost an assassination of the archetypal connection that we had and its expression we used to give in everyday life, and the goals we used to cherish in archetypal terms. So this goodbye to the myth, the archetypal anchoring of our minds, and our disconnect from nature, not to mention other tragedies which happened during this era, not necessarily always because of values of modernity. The tragedies may have happened because of some person's folly, or some country's mistake, or maybe some forces of nature or laws of nature. But all of that put together do call for mourning, and art can do that function of revisiting, celebrating, exploring, feeling the nostalgia, living the nostalgia and mourning, and then look at imaginative art of the coming era. And this journey of art from the era that is gone or going to the coming era is a bridge that arts offers us as we undergo a change of era. And just as our rational minds prepare, our emotional minds also have to prepare. And art has a great function to play there. Unfortunately, art has not played the function in the transition of the era from pre-modern to modern, nor is it playing the role adequately in this era of the closure of modernity.
How is psychoanalysis related to modernity and its closure?
Uh, this is a good question, a deep question, and I think psychoanalysis itself is a creation of modernity. It is a creation of the same Abrahamical thinking which created modernity. And it is based on the same principles of modernity of individualism, self-interest, hedonism, and materialism. And a rejection of anything other than the normal everyday reality. So a rejection completely of the sacred, of the magical, of the mystical, or of the parapsychological, or of the mystical or the spiritual. This whole thing permeates psychoanalysis. Psychoanalysis had its own Moses, who was very sure that only he could have revelations, and who was trying to lead the flock to the promised land through the journey of what he called the project. He could not complete the project, but I think that spirit and those unsaid beliefs and axioms still inform psychoanalysis. In terms of model of the mind, in terms of pathogenesis, in terms of dream analysis, in terms of doing psychotherapy, in terms of supervision, every major aspect of psychoanalysis is saturated with the spirit of modernity. And as we draw towards the closure of modernity, we see changes coming in. The first change essentially was from Jung much earlier, uh, who was not so much in the grip of modernity. And except for Jung, there hasn't been any sincere, not sincere, let me say, but popular attempt at bringing pre-modern or post-modern ideas into psychoanalysis. And that I think is a major change which closure of modernity will bring in. Psychoanalysis will become more eclectic. It will include more of positivity, more inputs from positivity, spirituality, holistic healing at every level, at the level of model of the mind, pathogenesis, dream analysis, the way you do therapy, the way you do supervision. So the closure of modernity has very strong implications for psychoanalysis per se. I think in the next 15, 20 years, we will see radical changes in psychoanalysis. And it has already started. It is not, it is just that it is not in the center stage. Uh, where the established people are or where the regulatory bodies are. Patients have already started holistic healing. Uh, they already do psychoanalysis and they also take help from pranic healing or Reiki. They do psychoanalysis and also take help from spirituality. They do pranic healing and also take help from yoga or homeopathy. Some young psychotherapies also are trying very eclectic things and they are bringing in elements of spirituality, parapsychology into psychoanalysis and doing very good work. It is the chips of the old block and the central organizations, regulatory organizations, uh, which hold power, which are still not open to this fact of closure of modernity. I'm reminded of uh, a saying in science, physical sciences. In physics, they say, in physics particularly, in physics, they say science progresses funeral by funeral. That it is only when the established people actually go into the grave that the new people are able to bring in radically new ideas. And I think in psychoanalysis also this is true. Psychoanalysis progresses funeral by funeral. Till the established founders hold the sway, there is so much of imposition and fanaticism. It's a very autocratic and despotic dispensation, completely intolerant. So it is tolerant only about free association in therapy. It is not tolerant about contrary ideas in the discourse of psychoanalysis. So there is no space for free association in the discourse of psychoanalysis outside of the therapy room. That being so, uh, the implications of closure of modernity are very profound for psychoanalysis. And one such thing that I have done is to create a new model of the mind, the heat model of the mind, and go on to a synthetic dream analysis and a synthetic way to do therapy. So I'm sure many like me would be already drawing in lessons and tools and insights and beliefs from non-modern areas and doing trying to do something better than what they know. And patients, as I said, already are in a holistic mode. So there is this new age movement. Patients are going holistic, regardless of whether therapists know it or don't know it. Uh, Young therapists are trying out holistic models. So I'm sure this closure of modernity has started impacting psychoanalysis. And in the next 15 years, we will see very radical changes in.
My last question is now, how do you see the road ahead?
The road ahead is a complex road because we know the closure of modernity is on, but how to create a new vision is a great difficulty. The question is, if not this, then what? We know definitely not this, but we don't know if not this, then what? We don't have an answer to what. The reason is the world is so complicated today, and we already have tried out so many ideas that it is not easy to imagine a new vision and a new idea that has not been tried and failed and that looks reasonable. This complexity of the situation is making it very difficult for any new philosopher to emerge and provide a philosophy and a vision to the world. It's a failure of philosophers and philosophy given the fact that the world is so complicated. I have tried to create a philosophy and a vision for the coming era And with all my limitations and non-validation of everything that I say, with all the disclaimers put there, I have tried to create a philosophy and a vision for the new era. And I believe the new era will be based essentially on five pillars. The first pillar is of spiritual democracy, the freedom to believe or not to believe, and if to believe, whatever way one wants to believe and practice one's belief. And this is based upon pluralism in contrast to singularism of Abrahamical religions. So I believe spiritual democracy to be established, there has to be a worldwide conflict and a debate between pluralism and singularism. The pluralism of the East and Hinduism and the singularism of the West and all the Abrahamical religions. So this pluralism versus singularism is the first debate that has to globally go on, and as a result of it, there has to be the first pillar of the new era instituted, which is spiritual democracy. The second pillar is based upon the cultural democracy, that we need to create multiple formats of culture, of collective living. So you can have one group of people living in the family system, another group of people living in uh, Osho commune kind of system, which is based upon free love and free sex. A third group of people living on Sri Aurobindo's model, which is based upon celibacy and unconditional love and extremely high spiritual values. You can have another model which can be just a hippie kind of culture. You may have some other model which emerges in future and we are not able to think about at present. So this kind of multiple cultural formats coexisting together, each with its own do's and don'ts, and the individual being free to choose the format that he likes, and all the formats coexisting and co-dependent upon each other in a constructive synergetic way. This is what is the next pillar of cultural democracy, and this requires a lot of sense of responsibility and practical evaluation for the do's and don'ts to emerge to make this a sustainable model. The third has to relate with the political democracy and a true democracy in contrast to the sham democracy which we have around the world today. So a true democracy with its own do's and don'ts is yet to emerge, and we need a global debate of people which is possible online today to really create do's and don'ts and detailed processes for how to convert these sham democracies that we have right now across the world without exception. I don't see any democratic country where democracy is genuine. It's a sham democracy all over the world. Only the degree differs. It's a question of strawberry ice cream versus uh, chocolate ice cream, but ice cream all the same. That kind of situation. Right? It's a sham democracy all over the world, in the democratic world. Just the intensity and the flavor changes. So this the third pillar is of uh, democracy, people's democracy and true democracy, not the sham democracy. The fourth is holistic healing, the well-being of people, because we realize that allopathy has severe limitations. Uh, Much of the suffering that we have today is psychological or psychosomatic, and this has to do uh, with our not having inner well-being in place. Because in well-being terms, we are not where should be, the suffering is there. And for that, partly we are responsible, partly our families are responsible, and partly the society at large is responsible. Given that situation, and given the side effects of the modern medicine that everyone is facing, holistic health has to acquire the center stage for individual well-being, and that is very important. That has to be at the center of the new age, new era. So that is the fourth pillar. And the fifth pillar has to be of a designed world. That this is something we have not seen after the Vedic age. The Vedic age in India was the only age where the society was designed by a few wise people in consultation with society. And those wise people were known as rishis, who were highly evolved spiritually and intellectually, and who were not armchair thinkers who had seen the world, experienced the world before they started giving prescriptions to the world. So that kind of worldly wise, spiritually evolved and intellectually evolved persons used to create some models and then discuss with the society and then draw processes to implement that in the society and create a designed society. So societies evolve in two ways. They can evolve on their own or they can be designed to a certain extent, if not completely. The design, of course, the designer is not omnipotent. People are not omnipotent. Society together also is not omnipotent. But a designed society means to the maximum that we can, we design. And that effort has not happened. Today it is possible globally to connect on internet or in various other ways and have a discourse on how to design a society in the light of our experience and our history. So we have our own life experience, our own intellect and creativity, our own envisioning capacities, and we also have the knowledge of science, the empirical knowledge, and we also have historical experience of 20 centuries. And with all of this, if we can go for a designed society, designed to whatever extent we can in the light of the circumstances we are living, and taking benefit of historical experience, science, and so on, I think this is the fifth pillar of the new era to come. And this is the vision that I would have, the philosophy that I can offer for the new era. I am sure if the discourse starts with this or involving this, we may end up refining this or creating a new vision altogether. But somewhere we have to start. This idea that reality is too complex and therefore we just should not attempt designing society is a self-defeatist idea. It doesn't lead us to anywhere. If we don't design, the by itself evolution will be far worse than the difficulty of our mistakes in designing. So this is a time where we have to respect what we know and do on the basis of what best we can, rather than taking a pessimistic position of uh, what do we know about reality or who are we to design. Those notions actually have landed all of us in deep trouble. So we have to get into an optimum mix of allowing things to evolve and designing things to the extent we should. And that has to be a global effort. And these five pillars, to my mind, can be a philosophy for the new era for both understanding it, creating it, and to act upon it individually. Should this invite interest of many people, we can have a global discourse and see first from discourse and then by living that living the conclusions of the discourse, what comes out of it and how best we can uh, manage the closure of modernity and design a new era much better than what it would be left to itself.
So in that sense, what I feel is that a lot more responsibility falls on each individual in the society today.
So
Whereas in the past, collectively it was taken up. Now, from what you are saying, since we are transitioning from like to the closure and then postmodern, I think each individual has to become more responsible, more proactive, in this whole process to design and to also let it evolve in a gainful way?
Uh, because uh, if we don't do anything, not necessarily best will happen.
Right.
And we see the turmoil in the world today where nobody is clear where to go and what is happening and what is the way out. People are just caught in the middle of a tornado kind of a social situation, not knowing what to do at individual or social levels.
True.
And this chaotic situation is not in anybody's interest, neither for society's progress nor for an individual. So this question of what to do and how to live and how should the society be and what I should do or what we should do to make it happen. These questions, if they are not engaged with, we will be worse off than if we engage with these questions. And we can't expect everyone in the world to engage with these questions. It is beyond the intellectual capability and interest of a large section of the world's population. But the thinking group, the thinking part of the society across the world, and it's a considerably substantial part. Even if we take 30% of the world, 25 to 30% of the world, even if they get together, I think present and future will be much better.
Thank you, Mr. Vaidya, for discussing this very interesting and very important topic which touches our lives, our day-to-day lives and the lives of each one of us. So thank you for bringing this up for discussion and making it available to all of us. Thank you for all the insights. And we should take up more such topics again in our coming videos. Do write to us at hvindia@gmail.com. Namaste.
Namaste.